Hi, my name's Michaela. Thank you so much for tuning into my podcast called The Comm Artist. A couple days ago, I was asked what I wanted to do in the future, and I knew already, but I did realize that in the process of making all of this, I was worried that I let fear get in the way. And I realized that actually fear will never get in my way out of all of this, specifically because of the feeling that I have inside when I start and every time that I talk about what I want to do. When I explain to people what I want to do, I say crisis management, and they're like, okay, like what is crisis management? Of course, it's huge. Like crisis management is a department in and of itself, and there's so many things within it. And within crisis management, the first thing that I want to do is help organizations, brands, and influencers actually fix their reputation. If they go through something that causes their reputation to be tampered with or tainted in some type of way, I want to find a way to help them. And literally every time I talk about it, like I just get this feeling in my stomach, my blood starts pumping a little bit more. Like I don't know what it is, I don't know why it is, but it just makes me so happy, and I hope that it can serve in the best purpose that it possibly can serve in. Producing these podcasts, putting together these case studies is literally feeding my brain every time, and then I'm also sharing as I'm doing all this and receiving feedback. Like, I don't think you guys understand. I want to do this so bad. Okay, I named it the Comm Artist, and I really don't want you guys to get that MM and NN if you don't speak English. I'm so sorry. If you're not familiar with English alphabet, I'm sorry, because M and N was like the biggest problem I had as a kid. And then I also think that biggest problem is what sowed the seed for my love for a play on words, for a good pun. Like something about them adds a spark to my life. So I named it the Comm Artist on purpose as a play on words against the issue that a lot of marketers and public relations and just media facing people have to experience, because the public has a hard time trusting the media. And I remember in a couple of my first, I think it was like my first marketing class in college, we read this book. I wish I could go back and find out what book it was, but I cannot. We read this book, and it started off by saying that a lot of marketers face the issue of the public not trusting them because they quote unquote put lipstick on a pig, meaning false information, false advertisement, making things seem better than they actually are. And that really impacted me as someone who started off as a marketing major before I switched into corporate communication. So that really, really, really shaped me to want to take a different path and find a way to lead into corporate integrity and social responsibility. So let's dive in. I named it the Comm Artist to defeat the fact that marketers, public relations, anybody in those kinds of fields, strategic communication fields, are con artists, right? So Comm Artist is to defeat, it is to deflect the label of being a con artist. So it's a little play on words that I decided to come up with randomly in the back of my digital art and communications classroom at Penn State Abington. You know, there's book smarts, but what people really want is experience. I have the experience of building a public image and representing companies, and all of that I want to apply in a time of a crisis. So I'm giving myself my own experience through this. I'm putting myself in the shoes to pick a company and learn about what issues they face as a company, and then also what tactics and strategies that company is doing to listen to their audience and fix and adapt and change what can be changed. All of this is going to be through a lens of my choosing. If I want to study about the image restoration theory, I'm going to look through the lens of the image restoration theory. If I want to choose a different theory, I'm going to look through that lens. Amazingly, okay, I'm not going to say amazingly because it's amazing with a grain of salt. Of course, it caused a lot of trouble for people, and that's what a crisis is. But maybe the correct word is coincidentally. My topic is about Microsoft, and today, literally today, Microsoft had their big IT outage. And I thought, what in the world? Like, this is a sign that I have to produce this podcast. I recorded it. I went to a studio, but I did all that last week and I hesitated. Something told me, like, I don't know, what do you call it? Imposter syndrome? Is there something I'm missing? But you know what? I'm going to let all you guys give me every blow you can give me if there's something I'm missing, because I cannot ever forget that I'm doing this to learn and also share my knowledge and to hopefully spark a community of people that I can find. Take this as my beacon of SOS and beacon of light. Like, hello, where are my other crisis management people that are also as passionate about their job as I am, that is willing to talk about it, that's willing to jump into these conversations, hear what we have to say, and come up with ideas to help people put forth their best self. Now, I'm not going to talk about the outage specifically. Today is actually about Microsoft's issue and the scrutiny that Microsoft has been receiving since 2010 about their labor supply force. While we look at how they've been taking all this in, we're going to look through the lens of the image restoration theory. I really wanted to emphasize the fact that Microsoft didn't publicize the strategy that they use in order to regain their consumers' trust. In fact, many companies don't publicize the strategy that they use. And a lot of that is based off of the fact that they want their audience to believe that what they're doing is sincere, and that's true. Them deciding on a strategy to use is no different than you sitting back and figuring out what can I do to apologize to this person, or what can I do to change. When you have these thought processes, these are strategies in mind. And as a company, the ethical sourcing officer, the public relations strategist, the supply chain managers, senior management, and the VP of operations even, they decide to sit down together and find out what the morale of the company is and how they can regain their integrity. Microsoft excels in setting an example for other companies in the tech industry, and this is a really big deal. So let's say the Microsoft team decided to sit down with the crisis management specialist, and the image restoration theory is what aligns the best with how they're going to make the proper adaptations and the proper changes. One thing that would be deeply considered is the fact that the image restoration theory that I'm going to use in this case study actually has 5 different strategies, but those 5 strategies don't all align with what Microsoft represents. So the 5 strategies are corrective action, evasion of responsibility, mortification, reducing offensiveness, and denial. But if they chose denial in this case or evasion of responsibility, it would actually do more harm to their organization than good. And I'll explain why. In 2010, Microsoft received a public media outcry about secret inspection forces and other nonprofit organizations producing information that reported that they hired underage workers, conducted unethical management practices, and enforced long shifts. And some of this demographically involved the Uyghur workers in China's Xinjiang region. If you'd like more information, you can find it on the Business and Human Rights Resource Center website. It also comes with a nice little timeline for you to view if you don't have that much time. But if Microsoft was confronted with this and the first thing that they did was deny it, that would actually harm their reputation even more. So denial will be left out of this case study just to prove that some strategies are not the best strategy for a company, because denial is taking the action and saying we did not engage in the alleged activity. Then if denial is not in it, what other strategies would be chosen in this period in time? After reviewing some of the actions they took, I realized that corrective action, mortification, and reducing offensiveness were actually the top 3 best strategies for them to choose. By hiring underage workers and conducting unethical management practices, they really did impact the health and well-being of workers. They enforced long working hours. If they didn't meet productivity time, management would enforce unethical disciplinary actions. So choosing the path of mortification in this case would deeply contrast denial, because mortification actually provides transparency and acknowledging fully the incident at hand. Mortification is taking the action of giving some type of public apology or acknowledgement of the situation. And you'll often see a public apology is being given through a CEO or a very specific person at fault. Not to rear off subject, but when Will Smith acted violently in front of the award ceremony, he posted a public apology on Instagram. It was written, but it was also an expression of mortification. So through Microsoft being able to produce a public apology through their CEO, this provided transparency and a positive internal and external outlook for Microsoft to display a more effective and renewed corporate responsibility. But of course, you can't just apologize and let everything continue as normal. Actually, following an apology and following mortification requires corrective action, which is another strategy that we'll go over in the image restoration theory. Corrective action directly addresses issues and makes an effort to bring the problem to an endpoint. I was looking through some of Microsoft's impact summary, and in the 2023 impact summary, they reported that they resolved 154 cases related to wages and benefits. And the way these cases were heard was through the implementation of a new program that they have called the Anonymous Workers Voice Hotline. And through this, their internal stakeholders are able to vocalize any issues that they have or injustices that they feel like they've received within the company. On top of that, Microsoft also partnered with internal audit organizations that have the ability to do undercover audits and listen into some of these phone calls. Implementing the hotline is a prime example of a corrective action that reinforces their core values of integrity, accountability, and respect for people. And the third strategy that I chose is reduce offensiveness. I really want to highlight the difference between reducing offensiveness and corrective action, because while corrective action, yes, brings the issue to an endpoint through the implementation of different programs, activities, and audits, reducing offensiveness sort of says, let's change the subject to something more positive. And while I say that, I was actually really hesitant in adding reduce offensiveness to this case study. The reason being is that reducing offensiveness doesn't necessarily fix the issue, but actually aims to make it seem less severe by emphasizing the company's good intentions and positive actions and other things in order to minimize the perceived harm and offset the negative incident. So I was worried by choosing this strategy and applying it to a situation where people are very much being treated unethically. I was worried that it would appear that Microsoft is actually turning a blind eye to accountability and then leaving the impression that the only thing shining through their windows are sunshine and rainbows. However, I realized that because Microsoft already acknowledged the issue, and on top of that, they made corrective actions, it would be okay to show that they did have positive intentions and successful intentions in other scenarios. For example, they did emphasize their corporate social responsibility programs, philanthropy projects, and other community initiatives. And all of this was pushed through their corporate blogs and other public relations strategies. But without corrective action and without mortification, this would have been a big issue and would have done more damage to the company. So honestly, one of my questions for anyone who has put together this strategy before or something similar to it would be, how many corrective actions did you have to take with your organization in order to feel confident that it's time to reduce offensiveness now? I'm worried that if Microsoft did it too early, then their customers and employees would have felt unheard or ignored, and that the issue wouldn't have been addressed. So those are the top 3 strategies that I definitely would have chosen within the image restoration theory. And that leaves one more, which is evasion of responsibility. And while I saw very clearly that this was used, I really do want to leave it up to you to tell me if you think evasion of responsibility was a good path to take. Evasion of responsibility is a strategy, and within implementing that strategy is the tactic of defeasibility. And defeasibility is basically saying it is not our fault because we did not know. If we knew, this would have never happened. And when all of this came to light, the CEO first stated that they doubt that this is happening, but they'll do audits in order to find out what's going on. And then once they found out that it was actually happening, then they followed through with the corrective measures and mortification. But is defeasibility a proper front line to give to their audience? In this case, it would seem like the CEO was ignorant to what's happening in certain factories, just according to my opinion. And I'm not sure if that shows a lack of responsibility or if by saying they didn't know, it gave them the opportunity to show, now that we know, here's what we're going to do, and here's what we truly stand for. I hope that makes sense. If it doesn't, I hope that you can help me make sense of it. Overall, I really actually need this podcast to be extraordinarily interactive. I mean, how else am I going to learn, and how else are the quality of these podcasts going to get better? Or maybe if you know somebody else who might happen to know what to say, please share it with them so that they can help me. Also, let me know if there are any new strategies or new theories that are being implemented in your workplace, and I would love to do a case study on them. You can feel free to leave your company name anonymous. I could use that strategy and apply it to a different circumstance that has nothing to do with that company in general. I hope you guys learned something from this, and at least you can walk away knowing what mortification means. I know I certainly walked away with a lot more knowledge than how I started. And that's the point of this podcast, to continuously learn. So thank you so much for learning with me, and I really hope you guys all have a good rest of your day. Until next time.